we can see a movement of countries moving upwards in income. Most countries have increased their per person income, while at the same time, they also have moved towards the left, increased their biocapacity deficit, or running now a larger biocapacity, a smaller biocapacity reserve. So what does that mean? Let me give you 3 totally separate interpretations. Let me also emphasize that these different interpretations, they don't talk to each other. They have their own universities, they have their own newspapers, they have their own radio shows. And one interpretation is the following. They see clearly, obviously, what you can see is it's a good thing to use up your resources. The more you use up your resources, the higher your income. Wonderful, all on track. And then there are others that say, yes, we have made a lot of progress, and we can also see the strain on our planet. And on the weekend, we cry a little bit. We give some money to WWF. But Monday to Friday, that's what you gotta do, you know. And then we come home again on Friday, say, oh, have we paid some money to WWF? And then there's a third group. They say, do locomotives truly run without energy? In the United States, there were billions of passenger pigeons, and they apparently were very tasty. And they were easy to catch. And you could have big nets and catch them in big flocks. Sometimes the sky would be black of pigeons coming by. And you could get some money by catching them and shipping them to New York, and they liked them there. And people were so effective at catching them that suddenly they disappeared. It was hard to find, and one was kept in the Cincinnati Zoo. I think it died lonely in 1912. And that was the last one. And the passenger pigeon economy shriveled away. And that may be another interpretation of this graph. Who is right? And I think the way to look at this is by saying, what actually does this mean? First, to understand the scale of what's happening. So I'm putting in here, how much biocapacity do we have per person in the world? The 2 hectares Bill has talked about as well. That's what we have as a total in the world. And when we look at how much countries have moved in just 30 years, many have moved by that amount towards the left. Very rapid change in a very short period of time. And what we start to recognize is that perhaps this view of the world that we called factory world is based on an idea that resources are not constraining. That what's really constraining supply is our demand. If we want double as many iPads and iPods and iPhones and whatever, then they will produce double as many. For me, me. And that's the factory world. Supply is limited by demand. Go out and spend more, and we'll produce more. And we have entered into a new world that we call overshoot, a full world, or that is characterized by new dynamics. We call it the global auction. It's a global auction because we all, as countries tend to want more and more of things they don't have themselves. So we put ourselves in competition for limited resources out there. It's like we all want these beautiful Picasso pictures, but they are not made anymore because Picasso is dead. So we are competing for the same pictures that we cannot live without, but perhaps we can even live less without resources. So that competition is an auction. And what matters in an auction is not so much how much you earn. It's much more important to know how much do I earn compared to you. Because if next year I earn twice as much than this year, but you all will earn 4 times more than you did this year. Even though I'm wealthier in income, I will still not be as able to get my piece of the pie. So what we have to track in an auction world, and their GDP is very important, is not absolute GDP, but relative GDP, meaning of this beautiful global pie of global income. How much do I get from that pie? And is that increasing or decreasing? So I'm going to paint you the same picture that we have seen before with the same numbers, just from that perspective, shifting from an absolute income perspective to a relative income perspective. And that's how the world then looks like. What we see is that many countries, Switzerland, my home country, at a very high income level, so per Swiss, we get a lot of the global pie by selling chocolates and watches and pharmaceuticals and wonderful things. But compared to 1980, our share now has shrunk perhaps 30% of what the pie is. The pie has become bigger, our share has become smaller. So in absolute terms, we get more, but relatively to the total pie, we have gotten less. Now, Switzerland, having a fairly healthy government financial system, so not very high debt, we can ride the waves a bit better than other countries where we have a systematic double problem. On the one hand, we want more from the globe. Our demand on the limited stock of the world is increasing, while at the same time, our ability to compete, to bid for the resources in relative terms is declining. And we could call it even a triple challenge because it's happening in most places at the same time. So it's a systemic weakening of our overall economies. That's why we call it a global auction. Now, if we are higher income, like in Switzerland, you can say it's like a little cancer that is still relatively small. It doesn't affect you, but it's something, it's a growing tumor. But if you are low in income, particularly countries that don't have that much income and already run a biocapacity deficit, are becoming incredibly fragile. India, for example, very low consumption levels, but even less biocapacity, and not a very high financial income to bid with the outside world, puts them at a very fragile situation. Let me just show some other countries, just same picture with more countries. Countries that have a lot of biocapacity per person, Australia. You see very rapid loss of an advantage, Argentina, Brazil, New Zealand. We have Japan here, similar to the Swiss trajectory, United States, if you remember. Remember back like United States, Japan very similar to Switzerland. So a trend that we see around the globe. Now, if you still have extra biocapacity, you don't subject yourself to the competition for the global auction. You may profit from it, actually. It's interesting to see that those countries that own the true wealth of the 21st century are very quickly just giving it up. And that's what we also discussed, for example, with Colombia, and saying, in such a world, what's truly in your self-interest? And as a Swiss, I want Colombia, and I want Brazil to be far more restrictive with their biocapacity. Because we in Switzerland, we use about 4 times more than what we have in Switzerland. We depend utterly on the stability of Colombia and Brazil. So understanding our mutual dependence gives us all the right signals for us in Switzerland to say, maybe our biocapacity deficit is something to be careful about. And for Brazil and Australia and Colombia and Gabon to say, wow, this may be the most significant piece of wealth that we have. Let's be very careful. So it's turning a negative sum game today that we say, okay, let's use up resources as fast as we can because it seems to generate income, into a new game that's already supported by the economic realities of today, just that we haven't fully discovered them yet. But they are operating. And that's why we are working also with banks and with United Nations Environment Program. Actually, Susan is leading the effort with UNEP Finance Initiative, where we have a launch in London just a month from now, to look at that. To what extent are biocapacity deficits already today a liability to countries in terms of differentiating the ability of countries to pay back their debt? It's not about the future, it's about now. So let me just give you the essence of how do we move ourselves out of this pickle. And I just try to distill it to just one thing. And of course that's simplistic. But I think it's a helpful guiding light to say, what would help us? What would distract us from a safer, more prosperous future? And perhaps I can owe that to my grandfather, who was a banker. And what we learned in Switzerland to say, save for the worst times. Think about wealth. Don't think about income as much. Because wealth enables you to maintain income. If we build income while depleting our wealth, it will be less likely that we can maintain this flow of income. If we produce $100 or 100 yen worth of products and say, hooray, we generated 100 yens of income, and we forgot that it cost us 200 yens, we are not fully seeing the picture. If we choose our investments as individuals, if we buy a house, a car, investments in our portfolios of our pension, but as countries in terms of what kind of infrastructure do we want to build, and we build it truly from the perspective of saying, what kind of investments will generate lasting wealth, which kind of investments will produce assets that depend so much on resources that in a resource-constrained world, they become less and less valuable. We can choose clearly between, are we investing into traps, or are we investing into opportunities? And that's why I'm so proud of Japan, that we've had the opportunity to work with the Ministry of Environment as one of the first 3 countries to look at our numbers and say, are they just totally plugged out of the air, or is there some substance to it? And Japan reviewed with a large group of esteemed academics the ecological footprint to say, is it really representing reality as we face it? The other 2 countries were Switzerland and United Arab Emirates that rose to the occasion first. And now there are about 12 countries and a number of international bodies that themselves have reviewed the numbers to see, is it really a photography of the situation? France did it even without our collaboration, just using the material we have on our website. They were able to recalculate the French footprint within 1 to 3% time trend. And the number of UN agencies, and that's why I'm particularly pleased here to be at the UN University. For example, the Systems of Environment and Economic Accounting that's driving the new standards, where we have been collaborating as well to see to what extent we can make sure our accounts are compatible. And we may be using the ecological footprint as an example of how to use these standards to consistently explain the country's position. And there are more countries to come. We'll just be launching with the president of the Philippines in mid-November, the first report from the Philippines, supported by the French government as well. Yeah, as I said, in November, I'll be in Beirut with a number of ministers from the Arab world looking at these trends as well, driven by a local organization. We just provide the numbers, but the local organization called Arab Foundation for Environment Development. driving this very question of saying, what's truly in our self-interest? What does it mean to succeed in a resource-constrained world? And with that, I would like to summarize key principles. Of course, the biggest principle of all is that nobody can do it alone. We can't do it alone, and that's why I'm so thrilled to see so many bright faces here in this room today, because we also need your help. This is just the beginning. So we are emboldened by the Blue Planet Prize, but it just says, please get started. And that's why we also will ask those of you interested in learning more about what we do. We have a little newsletter. We'll circulate these yellow sheets. If you're interested, it's an English newsletter. We kind of report about the world and the progress made, not just in Japan and in Switzerland and in other places, but we'd love to keep you informed, because we also need your input and your wisdom, because we believe truly it's a winnable race. It's not a Sisyphus work of saying, oh my God, we will never get there, but I'll do it because I want to die feeling good about myself. It's about the possibility that truly it's shifting dramatically. Large changes in humanity have started from moral outcry, saying this is wrong, slavery is wrong, colonialism may be wrong, segregation, as we had it in the United States, is wrong, apartheid is wrong, and it moves on to a point where we share a new dream, but also we start to see that economically we just cannot maintain the old system anymore. And we are at that point, that economically the way we do it the old way is hurting us so badly that many countries and many currencies are feeling that reality very, very profoundly. And it's a few principles that I hope will help us redirect our boat, because like super tankers, you can't redirect it just 2 seconds before you kind of hit the rock. It takes some time to readjust and to have clear ideas. What are the key principles? One is that it is useful for an airplane to have a fuel gauge. It is useful for a country to understand how much biocapacity we have and how much we use, and to make choices about what's our self-interest, what level would be our optimal level. Because biocapacity, whether we like it or not, is becoming the currency, the most strongly supported currency by reality. And if truly we continue on this track, more and more so will be subject to this global auction. And in a global auction, you've got to track your relative income. And because of mathematics, not everybody can outcompete the average. So it's a very unstable strategy if you continue to believe that you can outcompete the global auction. It takes new strategies to succeed. But perhaps the most important piece is the following, the most forgotten and the most obvious one. I sometimes say it as a tautology because it seems so obvious, and you say, why do you say that? It's not even new information. It's the following. If you are not ready for the future, you are not ready for the future. That seems so obvious. And I think that's also underlying the fact that you say, maybe there is actually a very strong self-interest. And the maybe is actually, more and more evidence points to that we are entering this global storm. We are in different boats. We make choices about our boat for our own investments, for our cities, for our long-lasting assets. And we believe, and I hope I've been able to convince you, that the self-interest to attend to this reality is overwhelming. And that's why I'm so glad to be with you here, because I'm not inviting you to a game that we will lose. I'm inviting you to the biggest game in town with the biggest chances to be the champions. And we all can be the champions, or none of us will be. And that's why I'm so glad to be here. Thank you very much.